Hi, everyone, and welcome to Stack Your Own Deck, Episode 3. In this episode of Stack Your Own Deck, we will expand on Episode 2 and the self-management sequence. Today, we will delve further into behavior, our results, and the role of brain, mind, and how they work. So, Larry, let's do a quick review of self-management sequence and how it creates all of our behavior. Larry, thanks. How are you?
Great, Neil. How you doing?
Fantastic.
Yeah, so episode 3 kind of dovetails on to episode 2, which was the self-management sequence. So just quick review, we talked about, when many people think their behavior is random, many people otherwise think their behavior is fixed, and we know it's neither. There's actually a 5-step self-management sequence being employed by all of us, and many of us are unaware of it. And that is, it begins with our programming from birth, let's say, by those around us that love us, family, friends, teachers, siblings, and then ultimately ourselves, programming ourselves to kind of frame the world we live in, which then creates a belief system. Okay. And then we adopt a set of beliefs about this world we live in based on that programming. And then ultimately, from the belief system, we adopt an attitude, which is basically our worldview. How do we see this world that we're meant to traverse and get along in? And from that attitude, the most important piece comes our feelings. Feelings, as we covered in the last episode, are what generate all behavior. Most people think we operate out of logic. We do not. We behave and do things or fail to do things based solely on how we feel at any given moment. And then, of course, those feelings generate our behavior. And behavior, at the end of the day, gives us our results, whether we like them or whether we don't. The results all come from that self-management sequence.
I completely agree when I was so blown away by your explanation of this, because if we don't feel healthy, if we don't feel in our brains that we can accomplish things, we're never going to accomplish them. Even if, and especially if there's any doubt in our mind that we're going to be able to do something, it's not going to happen, is it, Larry?
No, it's not, Neil. We have to be driven by, we have to understand. If you remember last week, we talked about reverse engineering to go backwards through that process, that sequence, to find out what our programming was. Because once we understand the sequence, we can then change the programming, which comes right back down the line. It ultimately equals a different behavior if we change the programming. So we definitely have to apply it and learn to change that programming to direct us toward what we do want, not what we don't want.
And that's so true. I mean, when I think about what you're saying, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is something that we have to program our brain, which a lot of times we think it's going to be how we act or how we show other people that we really believe, but it's really in our mind if things are going to happen. And you talked about that reverse engineering last week on the last episode we had. Now, I just want to know, how can we do this? A lot of times, because difficulties come our way, circumstances that are out of our control that can really control our brain to think that we can't do certain things, that we aren't successful, that that we're not going to be able to accomplish things. How do we deal with these things?
It all goes back to understanding the sequence, Neil. If you think about it, most people have a default setting around that which they lack. People define themselves around what they don't have, not what they do have or do want. I would say this as a absolutely ironclad strict rule. Always, always speak and think in terms of what you want to do, have, or be. Never speak or think in terms of what you lack, because you'll get more of what you think. Thoughts are things, thoughts create reality. So, again, if you go back to programming and reset the programming toward what you want, last week we talked about chunking up to one goal that, if it's accomplished, what is the one thing that, if you accomplish it, will most dramatically impact every area or most other areas of your life. If you recall, for me, it was ultimate fitness. And then you chunk down to find out the emotional why. Why do I want this? See, you don't let the universe take charge. Most people are freaked out about things they can't control, like a traffic jam. We talked about that.
Yeah.
You could learn something in a traffic jam. You could just enjoy yourself and have some good music. You can meditate a little bit, or you can road rage and get yourself and ruin your life. Okay. So it's about taking control and defining yourself and your life around what you have and what you want, not what you don't have. But most people live in a world of lack and they just create more of the same. It's a downward spiral.
And that's true. And so if we in our way how we respond to things when those circumstances occur is how we're going to do things. But you say setting goals are such an important thing. If you don't, like, let's say I want to double my income in the next 90 days, you're going to set up some goals. You're going to set those goals, see what circumstances could come up throughout that time. What are things that might be a challenge, and prepare yourself and understand when things don't look great, how to reverse engineer it in a way to deal with that adversity and still have success, whatever goal is put out there. Because at times you could be going to lose weight, but then it snows and you're like, or you didn't get a lot of sleep and you're like, I'm not going to go work out tomorrow, or I'm really stressed, I'm going to have something bad to eat. This is where you have to do a lot of programming, correct?
Absolutely. I love, I'll share with you something I learned from Anthony Robbins, who they asked him how he became so disciplined in his daily routine. He has a very regimented structure to his day, and it's absolute. And he said, and when asked, how do you do that? He said, listen, I quit a long time ago negotiating with my mind. I'm in charge. I do what I need to do. And, it's easier said than done. I grant that. But the key is to, when I said chunk down on your goal, so you find out the one thing that, if achieved, most dramatically impacts your life overall. When I said chunk down, then to find out an emotional why, like with me, ultimate fitness was, I said I'd feel better, I'd have more energy, I'd look good. That's all well and good, but none of that's emotional to me. When I got to emotion is when I talked about my 4 grandchildren and more coming, and knowing that I want to live a vibrant lifestyle and, do push-ups with them on my back and wrestle with them and play with them. That's an emotional why. That's a driver. That's the fuel that gets me going every day. So I stop negotiating with myself in my mind and say, here are the things I set out to do. Here are my goals. And I know what's at the end. For me, again, ultimate fitness, which I framed around, if you remember the index cards, and putting the number 34 as in my waist size, to me
Right,
equals
exactly. Yeah.
ultimate fitness.
Now, one thing that you talk about, especially when your book comes out, is the brain versus the mind. I want to really learn about what you mean by that. That seems the same thing, brain and mind.
It does, Neil, but let me differentiate for us and for our audience. So, uh, people think of the mind and the brain as one, and I understand why, and you will in a moment too. But the brain is essentially 3 pounds of gray matter that resides in our head between our ears. Our minds are an intangible, I'll call it, faculty of the brain. Most people believe their thinking takes place inside their head, ergo, it must be my brain I'm using. And certainly it is. But the mind is a faculty of the brain, not exactly the same thing. In fact, 80% of our immune system lives in our gut. And you've heard people talk about, I have a gut feeling, or they'll say, trust your gut. There's
Yeah,
many
yeah,
people
definitely.
in the brain neuroscience community saying that the gut is a second brain, and some of them are even questioning maybe it's not the second brain. What it's saying is that our cells are thinking and communicating throughout our entire bodies. So I like to think of the mind, even though it feels like it's in our head, it's our entire body. It's our cellular self talking, expressing to each other and to the world, and helping to shape and create our realities, especially around illness and health.
So I would never have thought of that. The brain is more like a faculty that is part of your body, while the mind works through a variety of faculties in our body. Then, not just one part. That's
Right.
yeah,
Every cell in our bodies has an intelligence, and the truth is, our cells are constantly eavesdropping and listening to our thought processes, our self talk, if you will, and they're guiding and directing. They're true servants. They do what they're told. So if we're thinking lack, we're thinking broke, we're thinking sick. Guess what we have is our reality. Exactly that. If we think abundance and health and wealth and happiness, guess what we have? Our cellular self, our mind, if you will, our whole body mind drives us to these outcomes, whatever they are. It doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care. It just obeys.
Yeah, it just obeys, and through that, so there has to be a way of controlling your mind versus the brain, right? The mind is all the body and all the different things. So how you talked about, last week, just specifically setting some goals and looking what the result of those goals would be to motivate yourself. Put it on as we talked about, put it on, let's say your desk and say that 34 number, certain things like that. But this is just the beginning of this, right? There's a lot more to this. And so we have to talk about specifically how about the rules that are they, and why do they matter, and how do they create outcomes? So our outcomes. So those rules, we talk first about the functions of what the brain does. Now let's look at the rules.
Well, let me walk you through. The functions are really only two. Then I want to get to the rules. And this is pretty simplistic, but this really, and you're right, Neil, we're laying a foundation because we're building, I want to call it a skyscraper, a big, beautiful skyscraper of achievement and accomplishment. But we're laying a critically solid foundation here with this self-management sequence and the mind-brain role in these outcomes in building this beautiful skyscraper. So the functions of the brain are only two. The brain keeps us alive at an unconscious level. If you think about it, you're breathing all day long.
Yeah.
Your blood's pumping through a heart that's beating. Your lymph system, your nervous system, your endocrine, every system in your body's working, and you're not giving it a single thought. So it's at an autonomic level. It just happens automatically. And that's the brain keeping the body operating. And thank God it does, because it keeps us alive. That's the physical side of the functionality. But the real magic is in the mental side, because the brain mind actually, the second function is it electrically and chemically stores every single experience that we have, that we take in through our five senses in our journey through this earth. Every single thing we experience from the moment we're born is stored in our brain. Our problem is not that it's not there. Our problem is recall. We can't recall a lot of things, especially early on in our lives, but it's all there. And they've proven that over and over again in the neuroscience community.
So from all our lives, what comes into our brain, the things that we experience is smell, touch, certain events, traumatic events, very exciting events, things that you'll never forget as memories. That kind of relates to why we think the way we think then.
Yes. In fact, if I used to use the example, now the audience may be too young, but used to use the assassination of John Kennedy, but now I use 9/11. Everybody knows where they were that was alive that day. Everyone knows where they were that day. And that's because that event hit their minds and brains with such emotion that it basically shocked the brain to say, I will never forget this moment. And we all have those unforgettable moments, even personal moments, with our spouses, our loved ones, our family, that are embedded so strongly because of emotion attached to it. But it's not always that case. And I'll give you an example. Neuroscientists, and this is one of thousands, but they tested a woman who was 89 years old. And they were stimulating electrically certain parts of her brain to where she actually vividly recalled her 5th birthday party. She's 89 years old. She remembers who was there, the clothes they were wearing, the type of cake, the candles on the cake. She described everything in vivid detail, which is proof that it's all there. It's just a matter of recall. All those programs are up there stored in filing cabinets. It's a matter of recall.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And so what happens, and so at times, like I'll give you an example, Larry, where you don't have a great week owning your own business. You say to yourself, you know what, just everything didn't go well. Oh my gosh, then the next week comes and then something pops in your mind, you're not going to succeed in something. or you're not going to do well. And because of the experience, even if you're on a roll, and look at athletes as well, an athlete that gets in a hitting slump after they were doing so well, and then how do they drop so quickly down to mediocre in such a short period of time in baseball, basketball, any type of sport or certain thing where you have this dry spell. That you need to recall when you've had success. Go back to that time. Go back to when things went well, as you talked about in the filing cabinets of your brain, to make you feel that you can do something, right?
Yes, you're spot on. And a great thing is to have, I call them anchoring moments, where you were just knocking it out of the park in whatever it is you do. And it's like Tiger Woods hitting a great golf shot, or any professional doing what they do so well. It's all built into their muscle memory and their mind memory. It's literally true that Tiger Woods could hit every shot perfectly. Now, he doesn't, because, like you're saying, he has those down times, those bad tournaments. And part of that is that the bad times are trying to teach us something. I tell people to embrace them. And I'll give you a little teaser. We're going to do an episode on self-esteem where I'm going to dive into explaining why a salesperson can have a knock it out. A realtor could just destroy it in 1 month and just go crazy, selling like wild, and the next month fall right into a slump, even reverse the trend below their norm. I'm going to explain in that episode why and how that happens and what we can do about it.
And see, and what I'm learning from you, and I'm learning from a lot of experts that talk about how the brain works. If we go in our lives, regardless of what we do, because we're not always going to be the greatest, because there's only one great person, and we all know that. And there's certain talented people in our fields, but we're never going to. We could achieve that, but again, we can't feel bad about if we don't achieve it. We have to be doing the best that we can do, and not allow the noise, the challenges, the naysayers to dictate who we are in life.
Absolutely. And the thing is, as we're trying to teach here, is there's absolute neuroscience behind these realities, the high moments, the low moments, and everything in between, and what we experience, and then ultimately what we do about it. That's why it's so critical to learn not only the functions, but the rules of the brain. And I think these are a bit more exciting. Do you mind if I walk through the 3 rules?
Absolutely. Look forward to that. Go ahead.
Okay, so we talked about the functions. The brain keeps us alive, and it chemically, electrically stores every experience. But now the rules. First rule, you can't shut it off. The brain is like a shark. It never sleeps, and it's always feeding. Our brains cannot shut down, even while we sleep. I'll test it with you in the audience just to see what I mean. I'm going to tell you, when I say now, I want you to stop thinking. All right, shut your brain.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Okay, you ready? Now, I'm going to tell you what you're doing. You're thinking about not thinking, because you can't shut it off.
Exactly.
You just can't shut it off,
No.
right? So that's one rule. Rule number 2, the brain cannot deliver the reverse of an idea. The brain, the mind, can't take us away from something. It can only take us towards something. Let me give you a simple example that will bring that idea home, and some language patterns that work with it. Let's say you're a golfer and you're standing up on the 5th tee and you see the water hazard off to the left.
Yes.
And one golfer might say to themselves, all right, watch that water hazard, watch that water hazard. And they tee it up, and where does the ball go?
In the water.
Goes right in the water. You know why? Because they focused on the water. The brain can't take you away from the water hazard. So that same golfer should have stood up on that 5th tee and said this language pattern. I hit it straight down the middle. I hit it straight down the middle. I hit it straight down the middle. Don't even acknowledge the water. Same thing with health, Neil. I mean, I know I don't want to be Pollyanna, but I hear so many people all the time talking about diseases that they have, and they call it my disease, my diabetes.
Correct, yeah.
My cancer. I tell people, don't own it. It's an unwanted intruder. You do not want to own it. Don't embrace it. Okay? It is the enemy, and you want it out. So that second rule, the mind can't deliver the reverse of an idea. So someone might say, I'm no longer a smoker, or I don't smoke, the mind will automatically negate the word don't in that sentence, and it'll say, I
Oh,
smoke.
wow.
I smoke. Because it can't come away from something, it can only go toward. I'm no longer overweight. No, I'm fit and trim now. I'm smoke free now. And by the way, in these language patterns, when we talk to ourselves and frame these things up, we always want to talk in the first person and present tense. I am healthy. I am fit and trim. I am happy. I am wealthy. Not I'm no longer this or that. Because again, that's that framing around what we don't want, which so many people do. Okay. The third and final rule, and this one is really exciting because this one really where the rubber meets the road. And that is that the human mind, brain, whichever we talked about that earlier, I'll call it both. The
Right, right.
mind cannot distinguish between something that is real and something that is vividly imagined. Let me give you an example. And this is why visualization and self talk work so powerfully for people when you frame it right and use the right language pattern and mind patterns. When you see your outcomes you want, you speak the outcomes you want in the first person present tense. But let me give you an example. Many amputees routinely will report to their doctors severe and even debilitating pain in a limb of their body that is no longer there. It
Wow,
doesn't
yeah.
even exist, and they're experiencing pain. Give you another graphic example is in parts of the country and the world where they experience routine, West Coast, where they experience routine earthquakes. For weeks, sometimes months after a major earthquake, there will be aftershocks, right? And they're constantly
Yes.
measuring the earth to see what's happening with these earthquakes and these aftershocks. And it is phenomenal how many calls that they will get after an earthquake for weeks, even months, of people reporting serious aftershocks that they know from the metering never even occurred. These people are vividly
Yes.
imagining and they're experiencing something that isn't even there. But that's the great news, is because once we understand this, if we take what we want, again, not what we don't want, whether it's health, wealth, happiness, a job, a business, a partner, and we vividly imagine in our minds and vividly self talk around, I am happy, I am wealthy, I am healthy, I have that great spouse or that great job or that great business. If we frame it right and visualize it in the affirmative as to what we want, the brain can't tell it's not real. And the brain is an obedient servant. The mind is an obedient servant. It'll take us exactly where we tell it. That's why it's so critically important how we speak and think to ourselves. And you apply that to health. If I'm unhealthy and I'm trying to get healthy, or
Right.
if I'm healthy and trying to stay healthy, man, how I speak and think makes all the difference in the world as to my outcomes. You know, in his book, Bruce Lipton, in his book, Biology of Belief, he says, and I talked about this before in another episode, that there are three causes of disease: trauma, toxins, and thought. Thought.
Yes.
And that's biologically proven now. So it's powerful. As I say, if people understood, if we truly understood the power of our minds and our thought processes, we would never think another negative thought.
That's amazing, and I agree with you completely, and that's what a lot of the mystics have taught as well. I brought it up in an interview I did with a guy that spent time with monks and used that mystical meditation and different things to have to control the mind in a way for happiness. And wow,
Oh, Tibetan monks can raise and lower their body temperatures 10 plus degrees either way just using their minds. They could sit in snow half naked and sweat just using their minds. How powerful is that?
well, you think about Larry, our professional athletes make X amount of dollars, but they're not the most wealthy people in the world. The most wealthy people in the world use their minds.
Absolutely. Can I tell you a story that wraps all
Definitely,
this up and
for
brings it
sure.
home?
Yes.
It's a personal story. You know, I like to talk about myself and the trials and tribulations and fun I've had. Well, this was any given Sunday night years ago. And, at that point in my life, I had probably lost 25 pounds 25 times. Lose it, gain it back, the classic yo-yo. Couldn't figure out how to make this work and keep it working. And I would get frustrated. So it was a Sunday night. I just had a great weekend, eating, having a good time, drinking a little bit. And of course, it's Sunday night. I'm ready to go back to work. So I'm really frustrated with myself. So I pound on the table saying, this is it. I am finished. I'm going to get this job done and lose this weight and get fit for good. This is the last time I'm going to do this. I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. Of course, you always start a diet on Monday night. You don't
Right,
start
exactly.
on Friday night, right? So I go to work on Monday, and Monday's my birthday. And I'm sitting in my office, and a couple folks come to my door and say, hey, so-and-so wants to see you in the conference room. So I'm not even thinking. I'm walking, and I go down the hallway, and just as I turn into the doorway of the conference room, there's the whole staff with candles burning on my favorite in the world cake, German chocolate.
Oh, wow.
And they start singing happy birthday to me. Now, let me tell you what's going on in Larry's mind, and this is how it all works. Remember I told you all those stored memories, everything that's ever
Yes.
happened to us is in filing cabinets. Well, there's a frantic search. At an unconscious level, there's a frantic search in the filing cabinets of my mind, trying to figure out what am I going to do? Because I'm torn. I just pounded the table last night and said, I am done. I'm making this happen. Nothing's going to stop me. And here I am now faced with coworkers who care about me, care enough to buy my favorite cake. And by the way, I love that cake. And, do I eat it? What do I do? Do I stay on my diet? And I'm all conflicted on a conscious level. But at an unconscious level, there's a frantic search of all these filing cabinets, looking like self-esteem, diet, exercise,
Yes.
coworkers, friends, German chocolate cake. All these files are being looked at. And then suddenly, boom, within milliseconds of turning that corner and seeing the scene, a file is found and a decision is made at an unconscious level. And I'll ask you, do I eat the cake or don't I?
You eat it because you're thinking about it too much.
Neil, I didn't just have a sliver either. I had a big piece of cake, and I asked if I could take it home. And
Right.
you know why I did that? Because you know what file was found that was so dominant in my history and
What?
in my mind, in my storage cabinets, in my filing cabinets? The file that made that decision for me at an unconscious level was a file that said, you'll appreciate this. It was in the diet file, and it said, I'll start tomorrow.
Oh no! And then there you go.
Right?
And then there's always going to be tomorrow. I'll start this business. I'll start this new job. Mindset tomorrow. I'll be nicer tomorrow. I'll do this tomorrow, and then there'll be never a tomorrow. You always
That's
continue
right.
to go back to where you were.
I'm a big fan of The Music Man, and there's a great line in there by Robert Preston when he tells his love interest that, oh, darling, if you pile up enough tomorrows, you'll have nothing but a bunch of empty yesterdays. The time to do it is now. It's today. It's stop negotiating with our minds and start earning and owning what we deserve, which is a good, rich, happy, healthy life. And we can all have
Yes.
it if we understand the basis. And this now, between the self-management sequence, the functions and rules of the brain, and how those filing cabinets create that behavior through this process, that's a solid foundation for everything we're going to do going forward.
Awesome. So what should we expect for our next episode, Larry?
Next episode, I'm very excited about, and I'll give you the teaser. Centers for Disease Control tells us the number one delivery system for disease in America today is stress. The competition for our time and attention is insane. We live in a soundbite society, and we're all chronically stressed, most of us, and it's creating disease. We're going to do what I call the MESS cleanse, MESS cleanse, mental, emotional, spiritual self-cleanse. Neil, we're going to talk about how to take those emotions, which are literally destroying our physical bodies and our mental selves, and we're going to cleanse ourselves, or I call it a detox for the soul. And to learn this and to learn to mitigate and manage our stress is the single biggest thing all of us can do to get on a path to good health, either healing from an illness or staying healthy if we're fortunate enough to be healthy. I'm very excited about the Mess Cleanse because it's pretty awesome. It has a killer ending too. People will love the exercise at the end.
Well, fabulous. And again, we could check you out at stackyourowndeck.com, but also Larry B Wellness on Twitter, and you can check yourself out as wellness expert Larry Bradley on Instagram and Facebook, Larry Bradley. So there's a lot of places to connect with you, and I appreciate you coming on. And it's great, another very informative episode, and look forward to episode 4.
Hey, Neil, can I just say, too,
Yes.
We're also offering still the free report of 10 things you can do to put your immune system on steroids without the steroids. All the listeners need to do is go to win, W-I-N, win at stackyourowndeck.com. Win at stackyourowndeck.com and just put free report in the subject line.
All right, will do. And thanks for calling, and look forward to chatting soon, okay?
Always great to be with you, Neil. Thank you.
All right, take care, guys. Okay, see ya. Okay, bye. All right, that was Stack Your Own Deck. Take care, everyone.